So today we are going to learn about completing the square. Anybody know what a square is mathematically? Hopefully you guys all know the shape, but what do I mean by a square mathematically? What? Something to a second power. So for instance, yesterday we talked about squares like this, right? That is a square. Okay, so today we want to make these squares. If I were to factor this, just this side right here, what multiplies to be -8 and adds to be 16? -4, -4. And if those of you like to do the diamond, you have 16 and -8. You'd end up getting -4, -4. Well, since both of these numbers for the parentheses are -4, could I write them as a square? Yes. So instead of writing it as x minus 4 times x minus 4, I could write it as x minus 4 squared. And it equals 25 because of what it was right here. And then this is similar to what we just did last time with notes, right? And I would just do what? Square root both sides. So I have x minus 4 equals plus or minus 5. And then would I set two equations on this one? Yes, so I would set this as x minus 4 equals 5 and x minus 4 equals -5. And we would then solve, so I'd add 4 to both sides, making x equals 9. And over here I add 4 to both sides, making x equal -1. Now on this one, if you could have subtracted 25 to make it set equal to 0, and you would get the same answers of 9 and -1. But what we're doing today is we want to end up making squares and solving them. Okay? So on example 2, and do you guys want, maybe I should show you. So what I meant by this is if I take x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 25, and I subtracted 25 to make it set equal to 0, we have x squared minus 8x minus, what would that be? 9 equals 0. And then that can factor to be x minus 9 and x plus 1 equals 0. And when you solve those, we get x equals 9 and -1. Do we see that? So we see how we got the same answer either way. Okay, well what's going to happen with our problems is on this one, if I subtracted 5, I would get 76. Well, there isn't any way of finding a number that multiplies to be 76 and adds to be -18. This one will not work that way. Okay, but can this end up factoring to make a square? So what on this one multiplies to be 81 and adds to be -18? -9 and -9. So I'm going to skip a step there and just write it as x minus 9 squared equals 5. And what would you do in order to get the squares by itself? So we just square root of both sides. Anytime we take the square root, our answer becomes what? And I can't reduce root 5, can I? So what am I going to do now? We don't need to set up two equations on this one, and my reason for not setting up two equations is that will I be able to add together like 9 and root 5? No. So all we're going to do is add 9 to both sides, and we get x equals 9 plus or minus root 5. Now if you wanted to write that separately and write it as one equation is 9 plus root 5 and the other one is 9 minus root 5, that is the same answer. This is just a shortcut and not having to write as much. Do you guys understand what I'm saying by that? Okay, Jet. No, that would be wrong because it's saying the number 9 plus or minus root 5. If you had the 9 in front of here, it would be saying that it's like 9 times root 5 instead of 9 plus root 5. In fact, some of you kind of did that on your quizzes on some of the problems. So All right. So going further here, a perfect square trinomial. Trinomials, remember, are 3 terms. So a perfect square trinomial is where you can factor it and you get a square, x plus 9 squared. So this one would factor to end up being what as a square? Good. X minus 4 squared. So sometimes and on some of your homework, they want you to find what is the value, the C value. Your C value is always that number at the end that doesn't have a letter with it. They want to know what that number is in order to make it a perfect square trinomial. The way you do it, and if you look here, if you always take half of this number, half of your B number, and square it, you get the number you need at the end. So if you look here, what's half of 18? 9. And what's 9 squared? That worked. What is half of negative 8? Negative 4. And negative 4 squared is positive 16. So that is the steps here. So on here, if I'm finding my C value, I take 16 divided by 2, which is 8. And 8 squared is 64. So this number right here, your half number, that is what makes your square. So my C value is 64, and then my square would end up being x plus 8 squared. So these are your 2 answers. They want to know what is the C value that can make it a perfect square, and then write it as a perfect square. So let's see if you can do B on your own. So this next question, see if you can tell me what the C value is going to be, and then write the problem as a perfect square. Yeah, and then it's in comma. Yeah, it's the C and then that one. Good. 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 This one's not, but it's a little confusing. But that's right. But you know what? You're close. Just so you know, it's part of it. Yeah. Remember when you square one and they get to 1? Okay. All right, so we take negative 2 divided by 2, which makes negative 1. And when we square negative 1, that makes a positive 1. But when I write my square, it will always be the half number, so that will be x minus 1 squared. So my answer, or your answer, should have been positive 1 for C and x minus 1 squared for our square.
So
Okay.
So like x squared plus 2x plus c. In the parentheses, your answer would be plus 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Courtney.
Why is it 1?
This part right here, 1?
Yeah.
Because you're always squaring, so you take your half number. So we take negative 2 divided by 2, which gave us negative 1. That half number is the one that goes here.
And you square.
But when you square it, you get a positive 1.
Okay.
So the end number will always be positive.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So on C, thank you for being quiet, we take negative 15 divided by 2. Well, this doesn't reduce evenly. I would just leave it as a fraction. But if you want to write it as negative 7.5, you can. But when you square this, it's easier if you just leave it like this. So when you squared negative 15 divided by 2 squared, well, what's 15 squared? Very good. So it'd be 225 over 4. So my C value, I'm just leaving it as a fraction. And that's 225 over 4. If you want to put that as a decimal, you can. But you'll see it like this more often. So that's my C value. And then for my square, I'm just going to write that as what? No, remember you're taking your half number. So So this is actually the half number. So I'm leaving it as x minus 15 over 2, or if you change that to 7.5, that's also fine, squared. You're not going to see the fractions in completing the square very often, but I just want you to see it. Okay. Questions? All right, moving on. Okay, so solve by completing the square. You need to first get the equation so that your x's, thank you for being quiet, so that your x's are on one side and your plain number is on the other. Okay, the second step is to find c. We just learned how to find c, right? And then you're going to solve. So on here, we have the equation x squared plus 6x equals 16. Notice how all the x's are on the left and the plain number is on the right. Do we see this? Okay, next step is to find our c value. So you take 6 divided by 2, which makes, what's 6 divided by 2? 3. Okay, and then 3 squared gave us 9. So 9 went in both of these boxes. When you're completing the square, okay, whatever you do to one side, we always have to be fair and do it to the other side, right? So in order to complete the square, I have to put a 9 on this side, which means you have to do a 9 on the other side, okay? And then I can write x squared plus 6x plus 9 as a square by writing it as x plus 3 squared, because remember our half number was 3, equals, and then 16 plus 9 is 25. At that point then, this we know how to solve, right? And how do we solve that? You take the square root of both sides. When you do that, you get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 5. And then it's easiest to just set it up as your two equations, I think. So instead of doing this process, I just write it as x plus 3 equals 5, x plus 3 equals negative 5, and then solve. So we would subtract 3, and that's how we get x equals 2. And here we subtract 3 and get x equals negative 8. Okay, so that example was done for us. I just walked you through that. Okay, so now we're going to do example 4 together. Are you guys ready? Okay, so we are going to solve by completing the square. When you're solving by completing the square, you need all your x's on one side and your numbers that don't have x's on the other. That's already done on example 4. When you're completing the square, remember we're going to need a c value. So I'm going to write this as x squared plus 6x plus blank equals negative 1, and I'm going to do another plus blank to remind me that whatever number I put here for my c, I have to do the same number on the other side. Okay? Next step is to find the c value. How do I find the c value? Good. 6 divided by 2 equals 3, and then 3 squared is what? 9. So 9 is the value that is going in both of those blanks. Okay, so now how do I write this side as a square? Very good. It's going to be x plus 3 squared, because whatever the half number was, that's the value that's going to end up going in there. If you wanted to go back and do that all as a diamond, you could, but you'll end up getting that same answer. Okay? Equals, and what is negative 1 plus 9? 8. Okay? So at this point now, this is where you should know how to do it. So the square is by itself. What do? Square root both sides. Anytime you take the square root, your answer is going to be what? Plus or minus. And can 8 break down? Very good, 2 root 2. You get that by going 4 times 2, and then 4 is 2 and 2, so a pair of 2's with the 2 left over, which is 2 root 2. Do you think I need to separate this? No, because I'm not going to be able to combine a 3 and a 2 root 2. So at this point, all I do is subtract 3 to both sides, and I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 2. And that is my answer. And I'm going to stop there and do the next example on the next video.